A Shot in the Dark by Silverpup. Chapter 39. Mordor was a black desert of ashes and sulfur. The air was thick with smoke and fire, and he doubted he would ever see a blue sky no matter what the season was. The rocks and dirt that made up the land was jagged enough that even his hobbit feet began to hurt. But the most disturbing quality of Mordor was the unbearable heat. "When do we reach the tunnels?" Bilbo asked his rescuers as he followed them along the edges of the steep mountain. His shirt clung to his sweaty skin in a sticky mass, and he could feel even more sweat beating down his neck and back. It was all very disgusting. "Soon! It's only a little further," Fili replied, glancing at him over his shoulder with a frown. "Are you feeling tired? We can stop and rest." He shook his head slowly. "No, I can keep going." Fili didn't look convinced, but he didn't push the hobbit. The truth was, Bilbo did want to stop and rest, but he wanted to get out of Mordor more. So even though his body hurt and his vision was a bit blurry, he forced himself to keep walking. If he was lucky, they would get to the tunnels without him fainting and falling off the side of the mountain. Behind him, he could feel Nori hovering like he was channeling Dory. Part of him was touched by the usually aloof thief's concern, but a bigger part was annoyed that he was being treated like some invalid child. He had not survived 100, or was it 50, years out of sheer luck, no matter what Gandalf claimed. One foot in front of the other, he ordered his body sternly as they continued their climb. When they finally reached the tunnels about 1,000,000 years later, Bilbo immediately allowed himself to collapse against the nearest wall. He slid down until he hit the ground and then stretched out his legs before him. Every inch of his body hurt so much that he wanted nothing more than to close his eyes and never wake up again. Sadly, he forgot who he was traveling with at the moment. "Bilbo, what's wrong? Does something hurt? Do you need some water? Nori, pass me your water," Fili ordered as he knelt down next to the hobbit. Bilbo rolled his eyes as the thief passed his water skin to the prince. "I'm fine, just tired. It was a difficult climb up the mountain." Fili didn't look convinced and shoved the water skin into his hands. "Drink it slowly." He rolled his eyes again, but didn't refuse the water. Once he was done, he passed it back to the prince and closed his eyes. "Thank you. Fili, you were hurt during the battle. How are you now? Are your wounds healed?" "Yes, they healed some time ago," the prince replied. "Thorin and Bifur took a bit longer, but they're both fine now, too." He hummed as he took in that bit of information. "Good. What day is it? I lost track of time after the wraiths caught me." "Winter is nearly over," Nori replied vaguely from somewhere to his right. He opened his eyes in surprise. "Oh, I was out longer than I thought, then." His words made Fili scowl and Nori tense. Legolas raised his brows, but remained focused on standing watch near the entrance of the tunnels. "What did they do to you, Bilbo? Earlier you could barely speak straight. Did they torture you?" Fili probed, kneeling down in front of him. He had a severe look on his face that made him older than he actually was. "You could tell us the truth." "They didn't torture me," he assured the blonde, patting his shoulder. "I'm simply... being around the wraiths made me sick is all." "Sick?" Fili repeated in the same tone he used when Fili tried and failed to lie to him. "Yes, sick. Nothing too bad, really, just a lot of nightmares and stuff. I forgot a lot of things. My memory still feels a bit fuzzy, but it's getting better," he replied slowly, trying to think clearly. "I think being away from all of that evil helps." "You should never have gone there to begin with," Nori commented with a tone of iron. "Nobody knows." Bilbo sighed and ran a hand through his messy and tangled hair. "I had to destroy the ring, Nori, and none of you were holy enough to make the journey. It was for the best that I went alone." "And did you destroy the ring?" Legolas asked calmly, without looking away from his watch. "No, I deliberately lost it so the wraiths would not find it. I don't know where it is now," he replied quietly. "Not with Sauron, obviously, or we'd all be dead by now," Fili pointed out. "Forget the ring. It's not a problem right now," Nori ordered with a vicious scowl. "We have bigger concerns. Our burglar is sick and needs help. We need to keep moving." "True. The longer we take to escape, the more soldiers die at the gates," Legolas reminded him. Bilbo shuddered. He was sick and tired of people dying for him left and right. If Sauron didn't kill him first, then he was sure the guilt was going to eat him up alive. "You're right. Let's get out of here." The tunnels they used were old and dangerous, and obviously unstable. Nori led the way as he had more experience with marching through mountains, and a better memory than his younger counterpart. Fili made himself useful by helping Bilbo through the darkness, while Legolas silently followed them all behind. I'm walking on something sticky. I can feel it between my toes, the hobbit grumbled into Feely's shoulder as he allowed the prince to guide him. What is it? You don't want to know, the blonde replied brightly, patting the elbow he was holding. It's our guts, Nori replied, proving Bilbo's theory that stealing was his second profession behind being a professional jerk. We slaughtered the whole bunch of them. You're working in orc stomach and liver. Feely groaned as Legolas snorted behind them. Nori! Quit trying to scare Bilbo! I'm not scared of orc body parts, he denied, rolling his eyes. Just disgusted. It's a lie. We didn't really meet any orcs here, Feely assured quickly. He's just shaking your chain. Yes, I picked up on that, Feely. Thanks, he replied dryly. I'm not Keely. You don't have to explain things to me. But you're still sick, the blonde reminded quietly. Earlier you even looked surprised to see me alive. You forgot that none of us had died. Bilbo blinked a few times as he struggled to recall his words from earlier. Did I? I can't recall. Did anyone die then? I feel like someone did. No one died, burglar. You're thinking of your first lifetime, the thief explained in a bland tone. He instead felt Feely tighten his grip in reply. How do you know about that? You told us all in your letters, Feely said slowly, and he felt the prince's hair tickle his cheek as the blonde turned to him. Don't you remember? Before you left, you wrote us each a letter about you and your mission. You even warned Balin, Ori, and Oin about their future deaths. I did? Bilbo couldn't remember any of that. But then again, he couldn't even recall what color his eyes were at the moment, so perhaps that wasn't so surprising. Oh, then you know that you were supposed to die with Keely. Feely tensed slightly, and he leaned closer to the young dwarf in comfort. His mind had forgotten dates and faces, but his heart certainly didn't stop loving his dwarves. You both lived, though. You protected Keely, I remember that much. I'm surprised you even came after me. I didn't think anything would tear you two away from each other. Nora needed help, and I couldn't leave you here, the young dwarf explained. Keely wanted to come too, but Uncle wouldn't allow it. Said we would be too focused on keeping each other safe instead of you. It would have, he agreed, smiling slightly. Not even death could stop that. You died trying to protect him that first time. Don't see why it would change now. Reach east south on so many levels, Nori commented lazily. We need to get you to a homie, or a less, and maybe even a bedrock. Legolas snorted again, while Feely sputtered in offense. Like you're one to talk. You wouldn't even let Ori walk home alone at night. Of course not. Do you even know what part of the city we lived in? The thief scoffed. He could have been mugged or killed on our doorsteps. Oh yeah? Then what about Ori? Challenged the prince. Pretty sure he doesn't need someone walking him home. I never walked a Ori home from the mines, Nori denied. Nah, you just paid others to watch over him from afar, Feely taunted. Nori cursed his breath. I knew that. Dwalin. He caught the guys you had watching over him in Mofer, the blonde explained, and Bilbo could just imagine the mocking grin on his face. The thief cursed again. Dwalin is a dead dwarf walking. You were even the first one to volunteer to go after Bilbo, Feely added with obvious glee. This is why your uncle is always yelling at you, Nori grumbled. And of course I was first. Who else could go? Gwaine, his cursing would bring the entire army back to the fortress. Why did you come after me? Mordor is a nightmare. You were all better off letting me go and moving on, Bilbo mumbled, closing his eyes tightly as his headache began to worsen. He was beginning to forget what it was like to not be in pain. Feely's arms tightened around him and pulled him closer to the broader dwarf. Don't talk like that. You're our burglar, our sarcastic hobbit uncle, and you belong with us. We're a family now, Bilbo, and we're not letting you go so easily. Family, he repeated quietly, and recalled the blue eyes and deep laughter and the bold smiles. That's wonderful. I always wanted my family back. They all died so long ago. We're not that burglar, Nori chatted gently from the front. And neither are you. It took them a good deal of time to navigate through the tunnels that would take them to the surface. They rested a few times when needed, but for the most part kept moving on. Bilbo tried his best to stay on his feet and keep moving, but his weak and sickly body could only go so far before finally collapsing. Though he protested greatly, Feely ended up carrying him the rest of the way on his back. It's not a problem, really. I used to carry Keely like this when we would walk home from the smithies Uncle worked in, Feely explained with a bounce in his step. Well, before he grew so tall, the brat. You're a lot easier to carry, too, since you're so light. You're also not drooling into my hair like you used to. Bilbo rolled his eyes, but didn't argue with the perky blonde. He ended up falling asleep at the end of the journey and only awoke when Feely began to yell, "Found him! We found him!" The prince yelled to someone, waving one hand in the air. He lifted his head from the blonde's shoulder and squinted into the distance to see who he was yelling to. It was too dark to tell exactly who it was, but he could make out several figures running towards them. As they drew closer, Feely helped him down and steadied him when he swayed. He had just regained his balance when a tall and familiar figure finally reached them. Thorin, he stuttered, blinking rapidly. You're here? Thorin. The song of mourning in a language that sounds like war. 2 heavy silver beads that hang against his jaw. A yearning for something different, something more. Stopped before him. He was dressed in an unfamiliar armor with orcrist strapped to his back and was covered in blood and bruises. But his eyes were bright, and he moved easily, as if all his wounds had healed, and there was an air of relief and stability to him. Bilbo, the king greeted back, smiling crookedly as he looked him up and down with bright blue eyes. There was no hint of dark storms in those ocean eyes, only a calm and still blue. You're alive, he stated obviously, leaning against Feely as his weak legs threatened to give out on him again. You're alive. Thorin threw a look at his nephew, but still nodded in agreement. Yes, Bilbo, I'm still alive. Oh, good. You weren't last time. Alive. I mean, he babbled, and he knew he sounded like a fool, but he couldn't help it. You died, right in front of me. In the end, I couldn't protect you no matter how much I schemed. Pretty pathetic, really. Pathetic, the king repeated, raising one brow. I think not. You saved us all. You even saved me from myself. Did I? He wondered as he thought of Sauron's words, of souls and schemes. Or did I just make things worse? He knows everything that is to come still. He knows how he will be defeated, and he knows who will do it. He's going to win, and then you'll all die again. Thorin said nothing and continued to stare at him with his intense eyes. He looked so very normal with his unshaven beard and messy hair, and it made Bilbo angry for a moment because he knew he was so far from being fine. He would never be fine again. Eventually, the dwarf sighed deeply and reached out to grasp his shoulders and pulled him closer. Bilbo went easily and looked up at the king before him. Standing so close, he realized Thorin had a new scar across the corner of his mouth, and that his signature braids were missing one of their beads. Where had the other gone? Bilbo, I'm alive. We all are still alive, Thorin whispered, leaning down to rest his forehead against his. We are all alive and together again. Does any of that sound like a failure to you? But I didn't destroy the ring, he confessed, bitterly squeezing his eyes shut. And I brought Sauron back with me. It's my fault he's alive and so strong again. Thorin huffed and rubbed his thumbs against the pointy bones of his shoulders. Then we'll find the ring and kill him again. If it happened once, then it can happen again. But in order for him to die, I have to die too, he revealed, and felt Thorin stiffen against him in reply. He felt his eyes growing hot and watery, and once again cursed his inability to hold back his tears. Would he ever be strong enough not to cry in front of the warrior king? I won't let that happen, the dwarf promised, and then pulled him into a fierce hug that made his bruised and sickly body throb. But he ignored the aches and pains and clung back to the king because he would never get over being able to hug Thorin. You're not going to die with him, Thorin vowed into his hair as one hand rubbed his back. I promise. We'll find a way to beat him without losing you. I don't think you can, Bilbo thought, but it was such a lovely lie that he didn't protest against it. This time I will be the one to save you, the king whispered, and it sounded like the sweetest promise that he had ever heard.